Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Sunday School at North Carthage Baptist Church. Brother Chuck, your announcements.
Good morning. Brother Jason asked me as I was running in, he said, "You running in?" And I said, "Yes," but I told Ella before we got out of the car I was going to embarrass her. She has pretty hair this morning, and that's what made me late. We were waiting. Instead of a regular ponytail, we had to have this thing, I don't know what you call it, French braided or whatever it was, but I was ready to go at 9 o'clock, but she was running a little slow this morning, and of course her mother said, "Well, I have to get everybody ready before I can get ready." So, but I just told her I was going to embarrass her, so I did. The announcements this week: Bible study at 6:30 on Wednesday night. Brother Shealy will be teaching. Our soldier basket is still in the back. Let's remember to fill that up. And then April 1st, 2 weeks from today, is Easter. We will be having our sunrise service at 7 o'clock. Then we will have Sunday school. In between Sunday school and church, we'll have the Easter egg hunt. And then we will have church service at 11 o'clock. So that is the game plan for Easter Sunday. Now, I have a question. Miss Elaine asked Saber this question about Easter eggs. Normally, Brother Tommy Knowles had gotten us Easter eggs for the kids to hunt. They no longer make those kind of Easter eggs, and you cannot find them. So I think what we're going to do is ask everybody that will to bring next Sunday, bring some eggs, some of the plastic eggs or whatever. That way we can throw them out and hunt, and then the teachers we'll work on getting the prizes for that, because I feel like we'll have a big crowd of kids for the Easter egg hunt for sure. All right, any birthdays this week? All right, anniversaries. I have 2 anniversaries. Sammy and Faye Bridgewater have an anniversary, and Phil and Pam Kemp have an anniversary. Are there any others that have an anniversary this week?
Brother Chuck?
Yes, sir.
Next Wednesday night at 5:30, we're going to do soup and sandwiches in the fellowship hall. After about dark, it may be 6:30, it may be 6:45, as soon as the sun goes down, Brother Shealy's going to do his slideshow of the Holy Lands. I thought this is just great for the Easter celebration. Other than just being 2 hours on Sunday, it adds a little more to it. And you know, when he preaches, you get to hear about where he's been, what he's done, and he makes it so real. And a lot of you've seen it before, but as far as our Easter celebration, I just couldn't think of anything better. We're also going to throw in some, there'll be some at the crosses, and there'll be, we'll throw in some songs that go along with the slides. So it should be a great time of celebration. Come out and join us Wednesday night at 5:30.
Not this Wednesday.
That's Wednesday the 28th.
But Wednesday before Easter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I have one death in connection with our church. Miss Deanna's, I believe it's her sister-in-law, Miss Bonnie Green, passed away. That's all the deaths that I have in connection with the church, as far as I know.
And Deanna texted me and said, be sure and ask prayer from the church. They're traveling home from Baltimore. Deanna and Roger hit it home.
Okay, I'll put that on there. All right, prayer request list, rather long. Miss Mary Ruth Bowes, Miss Ruth Green, Miss Opal Kent, Bill and Oline Harwell, Lois Hamlet, Wayne Kemp, Juanita England, Potsy Enoch, Eileen Shoulders, Judy Sullivan, Michael Searcy, L.B. McDonald, Brother Benny Maggart, Brother Gentry, Debbie Dixon's father, Alec Driver and wife, Harold Key, Joe Kemp, Troy Ponder's father, Jerry Ballinger, Shirley Allison, Chad Green, Treva Shayla and Cam, Jimmy Craighead, and Roger and Deanna Shoulders on their travels. Are there any others that we need to remember?
Daniel Shoulders suffered a stroke. Please our prayers.
Let's remember this request. Daniel Shoulders.
Please remember Gary this morning. He's got a sinus infection.
Let's remember Brother Shealy. Anybody else?
The Teresa Turner family.
All right, the Teresa Turner family. Anybody else?
little bit over 200 that came home, but that same 200 have to go back out in the summer. So if you could keep them in your prayers, please.
All right, let's remember this request. Miss April's sister is home until the summer, and then she'll be be deployed again. Let's remember her and all the ones that's in her regiment. Anybody else?
If anybody needs a singing school brochure,
Okay.
well, those, most of these schools will take you up to 102 in age, so don't feel like you're too old.
I'll put that on the announcement list. All right, anybody else? All right, Brother Cameron.
At this time, we'd like to go to the Lord in a word of prayer. Brother Kenny England, will you lead us?
Our most gracious and kind, all-wise Heavenly Father, we thank you, dear Lord, for this opportunity to be in your house amongst your people, dear Lord. We thank you for this beautiful week we've had this week, dear Lord. Most of all, we thank you for our salvation, dear Lord. Watch over all the prayer requests, the ones that's been on our list for several months now, dear Lord. May you be with them and bring them back to their much more health, if it be your will, dear Lord. If not, just comfort them as you can, dear Lord. Pray to be with all the Sunday school teachers, be with Brother Anthony at the 11 o'clock hour. You fill him up, dear Lord, and let him fill our hearts, dear Lord, with your words and your desires, dear Lord. Thank you for all the blessings that you bestow on each and every one of us and this church, dear Lord. We thank you for what it means to us and the community, dear Lord. Be with us today at the 11 o'clock hour again, dear Lord. And all these favors and blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
My reading for this morning will be from Psalms 94:19. In the multitude of my thoughts within me, thy comforts delight my soul. This will conclude my reading for this morning. If we'll have a verse of song and pass our classes.
Let us stand as soon as we can after church today. We need to have an emergency choir practice just to go over one little song for a little bit. But let's take our books, look to number 455, I Feel Like Traveling On. Do the first verse.
Got a couple other meetings may overlap.
My heavenly home is bright and fair. I feel like traveling on. Nor pain nor death can enter there. I feel like traveling on. Yes, I feel like traveling on. I feel like traveling on.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to North Carthage Baptist Church Adult Sunday School class. I'd like to welcome all those watching at home on the internet. Hope you're feeling good and can be back and join us soon. The title of our lesson is Keeping Commitments. Believers honor God by keeping their vows related to marriage and purity. Again, this is Paul's writings to the Corinthian church. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 through 13. And of course, y'all know I am a numbers person. So this morning, my wife asked me, she said, are you studying or are you playing with your phone? And I told her, I said, well, I'm getting all these numbers again, so I guess I am playing with my phone, but it does relate to the lesson. In 2017, there were 60.8 million people that were engaged in a marriage relationship. However, the sad numbers, there's one divorce every 36 seconds in the United States. There's 2,400 per day in the United States, 16,800 per week, 876,000 per year. 40 to 50% of the marriages in the United States end in divorce, and there are 2,077,000 marriages per year in the United States, and they last on average per 8 years. In keeping these commitments that we have, I'll just use myself. I got married when I was 23, and I told my wife when we got married, I said, no matter what goes on, I said, I'm only getting married and saying these vows once. I said, that's the way I've been taught, that's the way I've been brought up, and I'm proud of that. When Mom and Daddy had their 50th wedding anniversary, me and Gina thought about planning a big thing kind of here at church. And my mama said, well, I'll kill you. You don't do that. But, my parents have been married over 50 years. And, my grandparents were both married and stayed married. So I appreciate those examples. But it says, that his marriage is hard. Both husband and wife must commit to each other. The relationship must be fostered and guarded. The lack of biblical standard in society adds to the challenge. It seems that much more attention is given to redefining marriage than to upholding God's desire for his creation, cluttering the conversation and commitment needed to make biblical marriage work. And you think about it. Commitment. A lot of people commit to things and then they fall off. For example, one of the things that I have been working on this week, Thursday morning I got up, I'm on spring break, so I went and got on the treadmill and ran. After I got off the treadmill, one of my good friends, the kidney stone, came back. So I was sitting there hurting. Well, my wife said, well, we're not doing this. And she, in the process of about 2 hours, gave me 3 sermons. And they were pretty good ones. And she said, are you listening? And I said, I don't know. Well, she had to go to work, so me and Aggie went with her. And while we were there, she decided that we were going to go see Dr. Rick real quick. And Dr. Rutherford then gave me another sermon. And so the sermon that he gave me was about drinking water. So since Thursday, I have had nothing to drink but water. And it's pretty hard on me because I am a Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew kind of guy. And I have definitely struggled these last couple of days. But I told him when I was in his office, I promise you I'm going to do this. And so for, knock on wood, for 3 days I've been able to make it with no caffeine, no Coke, no anything. But commitments and let's just say New Year's resolutions. I don't know how many made a New Year's resolution, but a lot of people make those to be broken. A lot of people make promises that they know that they'll never keep. But the commitment of marriage is something not to be taken lightly. It's talked about in the Bible. It's talked about early in the Bible, and it's talked about in the New Testament also. So again, Paul is writing to the Corinthians, and we talked about last week about how sexually immoral they were and about their tendency to go to the temple and to grab prostitutes and take them for themselves. And so he was writing to the church at Corinth to answer the questions that they had written him, and he was answering them back in the first part of chapter 7. And then it goes on, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It said, Paul was not yet finished with dealing with sexual immorality and related issues. His discussion in this chapter flows from what he wrote and argued in chapters 5 and 6, but the immediate connection is to the final section of chapter 6, verses 12 through 20, where he dealt with the relationship between sexual immorality and the body. Paul was taking the opportunity to offer a response to the matters that they asked him about. Having dealt with the negative aspects of sexual immorality, Paul now provided constructive, positive advice to help the Corinthian believers know how to glorify God with their bodies, whether they were married, single, or widowed. Likely, they asked Paul some specifics related to sex in general, marriage, singleness, and more. This chapter addresses those areas. Again, as I was studying this, I thought, boy, this would have been much easier if somebody else was teaching and I was listening. It's not sexual immorality, commitment in marriage, and things like that is not something very easily to talk about, because it hits a lot of homes, it hits a lot of people, and even no matter what side you're on, we've all been through these struggles, trials, temptations, however it is. Like I say, the devil will throw at you whatever it is that can entice you, and here we go with this lesson, and hopefully I can do some justice, and you'll get something out of it. Marriage and intimacy is the first one. Verse 1, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 through 7. It says, Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, nevertheless to avoid fornication. Let every man have his own wife, and every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud ye not one another, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourself in fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your inconsistency. But I speak this by permission and not of commandment, for I would that all men were even as myself, but every man hath his proper gift of God, and one after this manner, or another after that. Okay, in verse 1 it says, responding to some issues of the Corinthian believers wrote about this, Paul's reply is, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. This statement is challenging on a couple of levels. It is unclear whether or not that Paul's own view, or if this was Paul's own view, or if he was quoting something that they had wrote him. On this difficulty, biblical scholars are divided. Either way, the quotation allowed Paul to teach the Corinthians more about the proper understanding of sex and relationships, which he was willing to do. And as I was studying this, of course, I got to talk to my brother-in-law, and he asked me, he said, you teach in Sunday school, so sometimes he watches to make fun of me while they're getting ready. And I said, yeah. And he said, what are you teaching over? And I told him sexual immorality and commitment to marriage. And he said, well, ain't that great? And I said, yeah, it's a challenging one. But I also told him, I said, you know, I got 2 daughters, and it's nobody else's job but mine to be their mentor and show them the correct way and to do. And I said, if I can study it and teach it, maybe the better I'll be. And it said another challenging aspect of this statement is its meaning. A comparison of biblical translation shows the difficulty. Does it mean not to touch a woman, which is the literal Greek here, although recognize this is the euphemism for sexual relation? Does it mean not to marry or not to have sexual relations with a woman at all? The statement points back to Paul's earlier discussion of a man sleeping with his stepmother and having sex with a prostitute, but also points to how sex is to function with marital duties between a husband and a wife. Perhaps Paul was simply saying that sex is more than just pleasure, so don't view another person as merely a sexual object to use selfishly. And again, I said last week, everywhere you go now with social media, TV, everything, they are promoting sex, 100%. And it's all different ways, all different types, and not the way that we teach it. And it is our job to sort through and filter through to our children, to our grandchildren, to our people, what is right and what is wrong. And if we don't educate them, who will? And again, this week, I guess it was Wednesday night, I was getting ready to go to bed and got into bed and got up because Aggie hollered, and I looked and Ella was on her phone. And I told her, I said, there's nothing good on that phone past 10:30. And I said, I don't know what you're doing, don't care what you're doing. Click it and put it up. And I told Sabre, I said, we need to take that phone every night at 10 o'clock or whatever and tell her don't get on it. I said, because if we're not there, we don't know. And, the horror stories I see at school and all the stuff, it made me cringe to think, well, she's laying in the bed at 10:30 at night doing no tellings what. Verse 2, it said the reality Paul had to confront was that fornication was common in the culture of Corinth and sadly in the church. Paul said there was an appropriate way to handle the problem. Let every man have his own wife and let every woman have her own husband. This answer should not surprise his readers nor us, since the teaching is grounded in God's design at creation. God established the institution of marriage between a husband and a wife. No doubt Paul was aware of the catastrophic nature of sexual sin, illustrated far more too often in the people and the events of the Old Testament. His correction was to return to God's design established in the early pages of Genesis. God's design is for the sexual relations to flourish privately and pleasurably between a husband and wife alone. And again, when you say sex and we talk about sex, and again, I like to say I don't like standing up here and talking about it, but it's not a bad word. But it was designed between, and again, I'm not much of a book reader, and I hate to say this, but that's just the way it is. Most people read the first part of the book and then they'll get tired and put it down. But most people that I know that have tried to read the Bible at least have started with Genesis and went through. So in the first 2 chapters, it talks about this. And it talks about God created the establishment of marriage between who? A man and a woman. Between Adam and Eve. And it shows us, and that's what we should point to. That's what we should teach. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's in black and white. It's right there. And again, it's not our duty to judge, but it is our duty to teach. And then he created to add to the human population and the human race that God's design is for sexual relations to flourish privately and pleasurably between a husband and a wife alone. And so, it says marriage is God's unique gift to reveal the union between Christ and his church and to provide the man and his woman in the marriage, the framework for intimate companionship, the channel of sexual expression according to biblical standards, and the means for procreation of the human race. And it says that's the key doctrine for our lesson, family. And it talks about God's unique revealed with Christ and the church and the husband and the wife. Verse 3 and 4, a clear implication arising from God's design is that husbands and wives have marital duties to fulfill to each other. The language Paul used here is one of debt and repayment, showing that sexual fulfillment in marriage is not depending upon how one feels toward the other, but rather the nature of the relationship itself, a covenant agreement between obligations for each party. Strikingly, Paul's instruction calls for mutually and equality with respect to this obligation. By standards, women had lesser rights and different obligations than men, but Paul's exhortation was revolutionary. In fact, he confronted this culture disposition by calling first for the husband to render unto his wife due kindness, and the wife unto the husband. It says, speaking of rights, Paul addressed this issue in verse 4. Although it may not have been the Corinthian believers would have expected, he said that the wife had not the power of her own body, nor doth the husband hath power of his own body. Paul wasn't establishing a kind of carnal authority that encouraged exploitation of self-centeredness in the relationship, especially sexually. Rather, he was extending the mean of one flesh relationship beyond mere obligation to actually belonging to one another. Just as our bodies are part of Christ's body, so is the marriage of our bodies part of each other. We belong to Christ, joined spiritually with him, but we also belong to our spouse, joined bodily with him or her. So the rights now belong to the spouse when it comes to sexual relations and sexual fulfillment. Again, we talked about last week of having this Holy Spirit inside of us and being one with Christ, and having that Holy Spirit inside us in whatever we do and however we go. Well, again, as we make this commitment in marriage, we are joined as one with our significant other, whether it be husband or wife. And that is an equal partnership, and it's an equal partnership in everything you do all the way down to sexual relationships. And Paul is reiterating that here, where in a lot of the times, even up until recently, that the man had more power, more authority, more whatever, but here he's saying that it is an equal relationship. It should be treated that way and viewed that way. And that whole section there of verse 4 is on that. Verses 5 through 7, it says, because there's a marital duty to fulfill, and because each spouse's body belongs to the others by rights, Paul said, defraud ye not the other. It is one thing to make a case for sexual being reserved for married couples only. It is another thing for married couples to fulfill their marital duties to each other, consistently and happily to each other, to have self-control and walk in holiness. So sadly, some use sex wrong in marriage, forgetting the duty and rights discussion. Instead, withholding sex from each other becomes a weapon, but it should not be this way. Paul said if we deprive one another, we actually put our spouse in danger of temptation by Satan because of lack of self-control. Each person is responsible for how he or she handles that temptation, but the point is that we are stronger, under better control of ourselves if we are satisfied sexually by our spouse. And again, you know how it is to cheat on your diet. If you're not eating what you want to, and then all of a sudden somebody throws that cheeseburger or piece of chocolate pie in front of your face, the urge is that much more, correct? However, if you're doing right, eating right, doing what you're supposed to, it's much easier to be strong-willed and say no. Well, Satan is going to use sex just the way he's going to use everything else. He's going to tempt you by what drives you. And if you are happy at home, then it's a whole lot harder to him for him to crack that egg than if you are not happy at home, whatever the case. He says using it as a weapon or depriving, and then what's Satan going to do? Throw that temptation at you. And again, whether it's chocolate pie or a pretty woman or a good-looking fella, Satan's going to use whatever he can. And the marriage is something that is sacred, and you think he doesn't love to break those up, that's probably like another notch in his belt. You know, it's different to get you to eat a piece of chocolate pie or get me to drink a Dr. Pepper, but to be able to throw a wrench in the marriage that God has set forth, and you know, he's doing, as the numbers say, he's doing a good job of it. however he's doing it. It said, Paul told the Corinthian believers there are only two reasons to refrain from providing sexual fulfillments to the spouse. When you consent for a time, and that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer. Sometimes there need to be intense or intentional spiritual focus, and regular marital duties will have to wait. Paul admitted to this advantage was given by permission and not of commandment. And again, Paul is talking about being one with your wife and your husband and all the sexual things, but he said one thing that can stop that is if sometimes there needs to be intense or intentional spiritual focus, and the regular marital duties will have to wait. Paul admitted that this advice was given by permission and not of commandment. He's saying that there's sometimes that things need to be put on the back burner, and then we need to focus on praying and getting in touch with God. And in my studying, and I think that's a lot of things, a lot of times that you can put anything on hold and go to the Lord in prayer. And you think about it, how much better off would we be if we took this for granted? If sometimes, and again, like I call it the rat race, if we just stopped and prayed and asked the Lord for our help, for his help and his guidance to get us through. I know in the last 3 days I've been pretty diligently talking to him, and it's bad to talk about a Dr. Pepper and a Mountain Dew, but that's right. It's I wouldn't say I'm addicted to them because I've been able to put them down, but it's something that is hard, and whatever it is that takes control over us, and sometimes we need to stop and ask the Lord to help us. It says, finally, Paul concluded this section and set up the next one by wishing that all his readers were like him. He wished they were single as he was. His reasons for praising singleness will be discussed in the next section, but here he did not devalue marriage. After all, he's taken so much time of building up its importance. Yes, there are tensions and temptations and trials that marriage brings to individuals, but a spouse is truly a gift from the Lord. And we're going to talk about how Paul views himself and views singleness in just a second. But again, he wanted to make sure that, there's nothing better than a good supporting spouse. And no matter what you do, what your job is, what your hobbies are, what your family status is, you can't get through it without a good supporting spouse. If you've got one that's pulling, for instance, I'm a football coach. And if my wife did not like football and did not understand the time and the effort that it goes to put into it, then we wouldn't get along. However, I knew that before I started, and so when we started getting serious, her favorite restaurant was Meacham's. We sat down at Meacham's one night at about 6 o'clock and left there about 9:30. And we discussed, and this is going to get into part, we discussed life together. And I had about 3 things that was important to me, and the rest I said I don't care about. One, I'm going to live in Smith County, and on Sunday mornings I'm going to be at North Carthage Missionary Baptist Church, period. No questions asked, done deal. Second of all, I'm going to be a football coach, and I'm going to be broke. I'm going to spend a lot of time coaching football, and I said I've already had this fuss with my mother about her wanting me to be an accountant, and I told her she could go count somebody else's money if she wanted to and worry about tax season, but I wasn't going to do that, and that's another story and fight in itself. But those were my 2 that I, pretty much, I said everything else you can do, well, basically whatever you want to, and I'll say yes, let's go on. And it helps to have a supporting spouse and someone that has the same beliefs and goals and things, because if she would have said, well, I'm not attending North Carthage Missionary Baptist Church, or, well, you can go to North Carthage, or I'm going to go to wherever, Clarksville, where she's a member, then would not have been as pleasant and been harder to work through. It says marriage and singleness, 1 Corinthians 7, 8, and 9. I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. But if they cannot, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. Verse 8, it says, Paul continued the thought he started in verse 7 concerning his wish that all were unmarried like him. He specifically turned to the focus to the unmarried and the widows. Again, Paul's larger principle about remaining in the situation they were in when God called them to light here. Paul said it is good for them to abide even as I am. It is appropriate and beneficial to stay single and not seek marriage. Later in this chapter, Paul stated that singleness allows believers to be without concerns common to married life in order to devote to the Lord without distraction. Since the time is limited and the work is massive, it is better for the kingdom if they remain single and serve the Lord unhindered. This point is critical to Paul's argument in the rest of the chapter, but in this verse he was satisfied to say only, it is good for them if they abide even as I. And you think about it, and what he is saying here is that with marriage comes a lot of time, work, and working away from not having these problems or having these problems and working through them, however it is. But he said, like him, if you are single, then you can be devoted to the Lord without distraction. And he gives a good reason why. It says because time is limited and the work is massive. And you think about it, we all only have really a short time here on earth, and the work of the Lord is massive. So if we are able to do that without any distractions, then it's more profitable to the Lord. And that's why Paul was using himself as the example here. Verse 9 said, Paul knew that singleness has challenges of its own. Undoubtedly, loneliness and the lack of companionship are significant issues for many unmarried people. Paul's concern for singles in the Corinthian church living in the culture where sexual immorality was common was that they cannot contain and burn with desire. If this is the case, by all means, Paul said, let them marry. Only in the embrace of one's husband or wife is it appropriate to find sexual satisfaction. Is it better to marry and be holy in God's sight rather than sin through sexual immorality? So again, he knew the struggles and the temptations of being single, and he said, if you cannot contain this and do not burn with desire, it's better for you to marry if you cannot be single and work towards God's cause because of this intense desire. It says marriage and divorce, 1 Corinthians 7:10 through 13. And unto the married I command ye, not I, but the Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband, but if she depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. And let not the husband put away his wife, but to the rest speak I, not the Lord. If any brother hath a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which hath a husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. In verses 10 and 11, Paul addressed the married again. This time his instruction came with the commandment to not let the wife depart from the husband, neither let the husband to put away his wife. For those who are married, Paul's counsel was for them to stay that way. This command comes not from Paul, but from the Lord. The Lord had spoken on the matter of divorce. Paul restated the Lord's teaching here. And in Mark chapter 10, Matthew chapter 19, it talks about divorce. And again, when I read those numbers are staggering. When people have a little bump in the road when they're married, it's a lot easier to just say, see you bye, let me sign this piece of paper and be done, than it is to work through it and try to forgive and go on. And hopefully in our times that we can teach our children that marriage is sacred, and the Lord meant it to be once and for all. And once you're joined, you have that commitment to stay that way. It said verses 12 and 13, Paul made it clear that the following counsel was from him, not the Lord. The apostle was not saying his words lack authority or were merely his own opinion, but rather that the Lord himself never taught specifically about marriage and divorce concerning an unbelieving spouse. To the Corinthian believer who is married to an unbeliever, let him not put her away. The same applies for a believing woman. Let her not leave him. If the unbelieving spouse is willing to live with his or her believing spouse, then there are no grounds for separation. Perhaps by remaining together, the believing spouse might actually win the unbelieving spouse to the Lord. Again, one of the things that I did, I told you, I sat down with Sabre and talked about religion and where I was going to church, where my kids were going to go to church, and it is basically helped, and it's a great thing to be able to come to church with my wife and my kids, and that they're going to grow up in this church. However, you see a lot of people today rush into marriage, and one is of this faith and one is of that faith, and they go this way, and it's a struggle all through times. You know, it's better to have those conversations and have those things, and there has to be compromise, you know, but, you know, that's like I told Ella, when you're looking for boyfriends, you're looking for husbands. And I said, of course, you're too young to look for boyfriends, first of all. Daddy is your boyfriend until you know any different. But when you're looking for boyfriends, if he's not husband material, he's not boyfriend material. And I listened to, Daddy never said too much, but Mama preached all the time about who I was dating or talking to on the phone or hanging with or all the time. I appreciate that now. At the time, I was like, leave me alone, you know. I know what I'm doing, and apparently she was a lot smarter than I am. I wouldn't tell her that now, but back then I didn't believe that. But looking at that, at this lesson, it is about marriage and the commitment of marriage. Hopefully, we can do our best to be committed to our spouse. We know the devil will throw many things at us. Sex is one of them. Hopefully we can have that strong enough relationship and be putting God first and have God in our marriage so that Satan can't get between us. And also that, you know, that we don't go around in a culture of sexual immorality and divorce and all those things. Hopefully you've got something out of this. Again, tough lesson to teach, but one that we need to be mindful of in teaching, especially our young kids and our young couples and things, that even though there's hard times, if the Lord is in it, you can get through anything. Hope you have a good week, and thank you guys for listening.
see all y'all out here this morning on a nice brisk Sunday. Let's all take our songs of faith. Turn to number 456. One of Harold Lane's best songs, I'm Standing on the Solid Rock. We're going to do the first, second, and third verse.
Yonder in the sky, oh,
6:30. 4:30, we're the Luther Presley songs. We'll sing the first, second, and third verse. Get ready to leave this world. Laying up my treasures in that home above, trusting fully, trusting in the Savior's love, doing what I can for heaven's holy dove. I'm getting ready to leave this world, getting ready to leave this world, getting ready for the gates of earth, keeping my record right, watching for day and night, and ready to leave this world, trusting in the riches of His saving grace. In each earthly trial I His love can trace, sure that up in heaven I shall find a place. I'm getting ready to leave this world, and ready to leave this world. Get ready for the gates of earth, keeping my record right, watching both day and night. Get ready to leave this world. To prepare a mansion, Jesus said, I'll go. If it were not true, I would have told you so. Just a little while to linger here below. I'm getting ready to leave this world. I'm ready to leave this world. Get ready for the gates of earth, keeping my records right, watching both day and night. Get ready to live in this world.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the North Carthage Missionary Baptist Church this morning. If you're a visitor, we're glad to have you. Make yourself at home. Hopefully somebody's already shaken your hand and welcomed you, but if not, I welcome you, and we're glad to see you and glad to have you. We have a couple of announcements this morning. First, Bible study will be Wednesday night at 6:30 this week, and then next week, Wednesday the 28th, we're having a special Bible study. At 5:30, we'll have soup and sandwiches, and then at dark or dusk, Brother Shealy is going to do his slideshow back in the fellowship hall when he went to the Holy Land and teach and tell about some of the places that he went. So it'll be a special night. So remember Bible study this week and Wednesday the 28th. Our soldier basket is in the back. If you can, please remember it when you're shopping. Brother Byron has some singing school brochures. If you'd like to see one of those, just see him after church. April 1st is Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday, we will have our sunrise service at 7 o'clock. We will have Sunday school at a regular time at 10. We will have an Easter egg hunt between Sunday school and church, and then church at 11 o'clock. We're asking that all the people who will and can bring some type of Easter egg so that we can hide. We expect lots of children that day, and so we need to make sure that every one of them has an egg to pick up. Also, right after church, if I'm not mistaken, Miss Janet, we're having Bible school helpers meeting. Where at? In her Sunday school room right after church. Brother Byron is having.
We're going to do it next.
All right, next Sunday after church we'll have choir practice, and then singing.
Yes, right after church today, the singing sisters. Not the little girls, they're grown nearly.
the medium girls.
The medium girls. We're gonna practice with Matilda in the fellowship hall.
They know who they are, don't they?
Okay.
Yes, they know who they are.
All right, that's all the announcements I have. I have no birthdays in connection with the church this week. Anybody having a birthday this week? Had Miss Gracie Angel's having a birthday. How many? 15. Almost driving age. Happy birthday. Anniversaries, we have 2 anniversaries in connection with the church. Mr. Sammy and Faye Bridgewater, and they're probably watching on the internet. Happy anniversary to you guys. And Phil, Miss Pam has an anniversary this week, so you might want to, Saturday, you might want to remember that. Happy anniversary to you too. We have 1 death in connection with our church. Miss Bonnie Green passed away. She's Miss Deanna Shoulder's sister-in-law. Let's remember this family in our prayers. Prayer request list: Mary Ruth Bowes, Miss Ruth Green, Miss Opal Kent, Mr. Bill and Oline Harwell, Miss Lois Hamlet, Mr. Wayne Kemp, Miss Juanita England, Mr. Potsy Enoch, Miss Eileen Shoulders, Miss Judy Sullivan, Mr. Michael Searcy, Mr. L.B. McDonald, Brother Benny Maggart, Brother Gentry, Miss Debbie Dixon's father, Mr. Alec Driver and his wife, Mr. Harold Key, Mr. Joe Kemp, Brother Troy Ponder's father, Brother Jerry Ballinger, Miss Shirley Anderson, the Teresa Turner family. Brother Sheely is at home this morning with a sinus infection. Brother Chad Green, Miss Treva, Shayla, and Cam. Brother Jimmy Craighead. Brother Roger and Deanna Shoulders are traveling. Let's remember them as they travel. Daniel Shoulders. Miss April Dyer's sister is home from her deployment. She'll be home until summer and then redeployed. Let's remember them as they're home, and let's remember our soldiers who are on foreign fields fighting for our country so that we have the freedom to do this. And then also the lost and Brother Anthony as he stands to preach at 11 o'clock. Are there any others?
On your announcements, Wednesday night, our men's class is going to try to redo the mulch out there between 4 and 5. So if anybody wants to come early before Bible study, we'd be glad to have all the young muscles we can get.
Wednesday night between 4 and 5:30?
We need to put down about 100 bags of mulch.
100 bags of mulch party. So anybody that wants to party, you can come mulch party. Anybody with muscles
Women won't understand it,
and
but guys like that.
and a strong back, you're welcome. Any other announcements before we go to the Lord in the word of prayer?
Remember the Hobbs family.
The Hobbs family? Anybody else? If not, I'm going to ask Brother Randy Dixon if he would to lead us in a word of prayer.
We ask you to be with the service today, Lord. Lord, be with the ones that are lost and be with the ones that need you, Lord. Be with all the prayer requests, Lord, that have been made. And Lord, just be with the lost. Be with them most of all, Lord. Convict their hearts and draw them close to you, Lord, and save their souls. Lord, be with our country, be with our nation, be with everybody that's in authority that makes decisions, Lord. Give them wisdom. Lord, thank you so much for all you do for me, Lord. Lord, give me something to do for someone this week to be a blessing. All these things we ask in your name. Amen. Amen.
You know, it's good to see all these numbers of babies and young people out here, and especially some of the young fellas. I can remember talking about the mulch party. I found out at a young age, at where I was going to church, and I was 12, my dad asked me, he said, well, son, do you want to qualify for your pilot's license? I said, yeah. He said, good, come to church, we'll give you a shovel, you can pilot from here, and you can pilot over there. And I got my pilot's license at the age of 12. So I imagine y'all could use some of that help as well. So if anybody wants to get their pilot's license, show up Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Let's look at number 400. 400. Jesus spoke to me. We'll do all 3 verses. All stand, sing our last song, one that's been around a while and everybody knows, 432, Standing by the River. We'll do all three verses, give the chance for the bass and the alto to sing. Beautiful piece of music by Marion Easterling, has some beautiful words, good message.
Sister Matilda. Thankful for the good songs and the good playing this morning. Everything's been said and done. Brother Chuck, I know, has already welcomed you, but you that are visiting today, we're glad to have you and that you come this way. And if you're listening at home or wherever you might be, we're glad you've listening today. Amen. Bless you, Brother Phil. Appreciate that. Somebody else. It's his service.
Brother Gentry said one time that,
Amen. Brother Kenny.
Brother Gentry said one time that people see your car in the parking lot, they know whose side you're on.
Amen. Amen.
I love that.
Amen. Amen. What did you say, Brother Kenny?
I said it's good to see all these young.
Amen. We're thankful for everyone that's come this way. We had a good night at the fellowship meeting last night at East Carthage. They had a good crowd, had to pull out chairs, and it was just really, really good. And glad to see some from here at North Carthage there. And I have got it. I spoke for it for next spring. So next spring we'll be having a fellowship meeting here. So look forward to that. The way time goes, it'll be here before you know it. So, but it was really good. And it's good to be here today. I'm just thankful for all his many blessings. And we had a good Sunday school this morning, and we hope and pray that the Lord will bless, and we'll have a wonderful church service today. And just hope everybody just follow the Lord in it. If you have your Bibles with you today, our lesson reading will come out of the 18th chapter of the book of Luke, verses 1 through 8. 18th chapter of Luke, verses 1 through 8. And before I read that, last week, Brother Richard gave me a newspaper article. And I read it a couple of times Sunday afternoon. And I woke up Monday morning and with a verse on my heart. And that was from the 8th verse that we'll read here in just a few moments of time. But I'll just highlight a little bit about this article that he gave me. And in the latter part of the article was mainly what the Lord kind of burdened my heart with the message on. But this article was about a preacher, and he had decided that he no longer believed because of things that happened in his life and what he experienced is where he was trying to pastor at. And so he didn't longer believe, and he would just decided he would start him up a humanist society. And that would be that you would just, there's nothing up there, don't you worry about that. It was time for folks to put on their big boy breeches and just take care of everything themselves. And he was promoting this, and it was growing, and you know. And I say this to tell you, most likely by reading this article, I could tell that we all would probably be, me and him wouldn't get along religiously at all, to start with what he was teaching. But now that he went this route, I definitely don't know, you know, I had to question maybe what he had to start with. But I say that to tell you all this. Whether the religious world that might be totally opposite to us, and we might read about these things in newspaper articles on TV or different things of how, well, they just give up on the Lord and they're just going to depend on themselves and they don't believe one's out there. But we all know better than that. But I say this I want you to think about when I get ready to read our lesson reading this morning, that to the religious world versus the Lord's church, the Lord's church is not what you say. We're vulnerable to this also. Because even though you may be saved by God's grace and a member of the Lord's church, if you don't keep your eye upon Him and try to serve Him and do the things that He requires of you, you can get pulled away just like somebody that don't know nothing. That's why it's so important that we remember this. And I mentioned the latter part of the article. If you were born between the 1981 and 1996, I want you to raise your hand. Quite a few people. That's the same age my children are. It said of this age group, which y'all refer to as the millennials in this article, and this was from a different research view on the study, that 35% of this age group are religiously affiliated with nobody. Nothing. Well, the first off, when I read that, I thought, well, if, even though in the wide spectrum of the religious world, when people decide that they don't believe there's a God or don't look to Him or think about that or anything, do you know that the society goes down? And we can see that in the time when we live. People don't reference the Lord. They don't reference one another. They don't understand that. And that poll that would point it out to me. And I want you to understand something. I spoke of that age group, my children's age, that generation. I want you to think about just a minute their children. If their children, if that percentage grows, what's going to happen? See how important it is for us that know the truth. That's it. Tell people the truth. No matter how much they say there ain't no God in heaven, we know better. If you say by His grace, you know it. Amen. Keep looking to the Lord. Don't let the old devil get a hold of you, pull you away, because he can pull you in a manner that you might even get in the shape of that fellow this article was about. Y'all know that? It could happen. You know why it could happen? Because we all have seen people raised up in this old time way that have faded away. That's right. Gone. And that's sad. So, start here reading this 18th chapter of Luke. It says, "And he spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint, saying that there is in a city a judge which feareth not God, neither regardeth man. And there was a widow in that city, and she came unto them, saying, Avenge me of mine adversary. And he would not for a while. But afterward he said within himself, Though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because this widow troubled me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. And the Lord said, Hear what the unjust judge said. And shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry out day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on earth? The latter part of that last verse I read is where I thought the Lord's put on our heart today. Will he, when he returns, will he find faith on the earth? And by the scriptures, we know that he will. He will. I believe his church will still be working and laboring, and there'll be saved people here, because it says it when he comes back, the dead in Christ shall rise first, and those who remain will meet him in the air. So there's going to be God's people here when he comes back. Amen. They will be. You can be assured of that. But I want us to all think about something for just a little while. As I told you in there, talking there first about the people that believing there ain't no God or anything like that, or becoming humanist or whatever that might be. Unless we stay on guard and labor and work and be focused upon the job in hand, there's no guarantee where it might be. It might not be here at North Carthage no more. There might not be a speck of it left in Smith County no more. I hope and pray it won't. I hope and pray that each and every one of us will see a responsibility, and we'll work and labor and dig in and do what we should for the Lord and never let it falter. Because you know what's going to happen if the Lord lets time stand? Each and every one of us, our time will come and we'll leave here. We'll go. And you know what then? The next generation will have to step up. And if the Lord lets time stand, it'll be the next generation to step up. And you know what? Each generation will have to pick up and carry on. That's the only way it'll keep going on. That's the way we got it, and that's how it'll keep going on till He returns. And I'm thankful that we can look in His Word and know it. That there will be faith on this earth, but we don't know how much or where it might be at. We know where the gospel started over there, and there may be specks of it scattered from over there to where it ended up here. But you know, there's some places it's gone. There's even some places that's here's gone. We hear of churches some days now, even the membership is falling away. They've shut the doors. And some are getting into shape. You know, it's only ones coming is the older ones. That's how it is important that each and every one of us don't fall into the devil's trap. That we serve Him and worship Him and do what He wants us to do with our whole life. And I'm going to tell you what, it's tough. You have to make some sacrifices. You do. The devil don't want you to make them sacrifices. He wants you just to go on about your way and enjoy life. And don't you get me wrong, the Lord wants us to enjoy His life. But He wants you to serve Him. I'm going to go over to Hebrews for just a minute. Will there be faith on earth? Verse 1 of chapter 11 of Hebrews, it says, now faith is a substance of things hoped for the evidence of things not seen. We're hoping something that we have never seen. I felt Him, but I ain't never seen the Lord. One of these days I'm going to. I'm going to see Him. I'll be able to thank Him in person. I've thanked Him here on this earth. But I'll get to thank Him in person one day for what He done for me. But I'm going to have to depend on that through faith. And He don't give us empty faith. When He saves our soul, He gives us the earnest of the Spirit that we have it, and it dwells with us. I thank the Lord this week that I'm able to think about this message all week. It don't happen that long. Sometimes it's Saturday night or Sunday morning when I get it. So when I got it on the Monday morning, I got to enjoy it this week. And I got to thank Him for it. Now, I might do a pitiful job getting it across to y'all, but I thank Him for everything He does. Because that's just as simple. You know, the world, they can't understand that. You know, I wake up in the morning, and the Lord puts His verse on my heart, and it's stayed with me, and it's growed all week long. That's how the Lord works. Last week during the revival down Plunge Creek, the Lord said, you got to move your membership back. Now, the two before, during the service, so you know what you got to do. Well, I was walking out of the house. Now, I'm going to think this is silly, but this is the way the Lord works for me, and I believe He works for y'all the same way, because I don't believe He works no different. I was opening the door, stepped out on the patio, finna get on the school bus. The Lord said, you know what you got to do? I said, yes, sir. And I'm going to tell you what happened. I was walking over. I nearly... He just welled up in me. Said, Lord, thank You that He speaks to us in such a manner. What Moses say when the Lord would talk to him? He speaks to him. He speaks to us that are His. If you're lost, He speaks to you and lets you know you're lost and separated from Him. But us that are saved, He speaks to us and lets us know what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do, and directs us, and all we've got to do is follow it. And we'll follow it, but what we got to do, we got to follow it through faith. Sometimes we may say, Lord, I don't know why You want me to do that. He's got a reason. Follow Him. He says, for by the elders obtain a good report. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God. And the things which are seen are not made of the things which do appear. And we'll go out here and we'll see these trees. Did you ever think about this? They was one of them started somewhere. They just didn't make it. They didn't come up by themselves. They have a seed. Some planted. The Lord spoke this world into existence. He spoke it. He did. The world don't believe that. They believe something else happened. I believe what God's Word says. He spoke it into existence. Why do I believe that? Because he spoke to me.
Amen.
That's why I believe it. And if he ain't never spoke to you, you better check out what you got. Because he speaks to us. And once we're his, and he talks to us and directs us, if we'll just follow it, our life will be so much better. Now, I ain't always done it. I've told y'all that before. But I tell you what, my life's been better when I've listened to him and followed him through our faith. But on over in verse number 6, it says, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. We can't please him without faith. Believing that he is. Bible says he's a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. If you're lost, if you'll seek after him and seek after him and seek after him, I promise you'll find him. But that's a promise. And us that are saved, if we'll do what he wants and look to him through faith to direct our lives and everything, he will do that. Whether it's trouble or happiness, whatever decision it might be, he will help us if we'll just listen. And you can go out through all here of all these, through this chapter, but different ones. It said, by faith Noah being warned of God of things not yet seen, moved with fear, preparing that ark for the saving of his house. He moved with fear. Now, when we talk about fear of the Lord, that fear is not just once you're saved, you're his. It's a reverence that when he speaks, listen. By his word can tell us if we don't do what he says, there's going to be trouble. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read about that in a few minutes. Over in 2 Thessalonians in chapter number 2, it says, but I'm going to pick up in verse 7, and I'm going to kind of go over this first little part of it. It talks about the son of perdition coming, about the great falling away. But in verse 7 it says, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he that letteth out will let until he be taken out of the way. Over in 1 John chapter 2 verse 18. It says, little children, it is the last times. And this was the epistle of John. It is the last times, and you've heard that Antichrist shall come. Even now there are many Antichrists, thereby you know that it is the last time. The spirit of Antichrist has been from the beginning. And it is to this very day. And he'll try to pull you and me away, just as I spoke with those people. That I don't know what they believe, but they didn't believe much. They don't believe in nothing anymore. But here, after this comes on the scene here, it talks about, in verse 11 of this second chapter of 2 Thessalonians, for all this cause, God sent them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. And you'll read in other places when people turned away from the Lord and did not listen, he caused trouble to come upon them. Do you know if you turn your back on him and do not listen to him, he could possibly send something your way and you have trouble and that's it, done. It would be his will. You might think, brother, we serve a loving God. Yes, we do. We serve also a wrathful God. And he expects to be reverenced, to be honored, and to do his will. And if we don't do that, there's a price for it. Will there be faith on earth? Will it still be going on here in North Carthage when the Lord returns? You know who it'll depend upon? Us.
That's right.
Us. I'm going to go back over to 11th chapter of Hebrews for a minute, down to verse 13. It says, talking about these, he's talking in faith here. These all died in faith, not having received the promise, but having seen them afar off. Amen. How many of us that are saved today? Do you ever think about it? Do you ever think about what's going to happen when you die? Sometimes I just think about heaven, how it's going to be. I don't know what the Bible says, but I don't know. But I know I'm going there. And the older I get, the closer to it that I'm desiring.
That's right.
The things of this world, y'all have heard me say this before, the shine's gone off of them. I love my wife, my family, and all that, but this world, it don't allure me like it once did. I'm getting older. I know what's ahead of me. Eternity's ahead of me. Just as these people here that they all died in faith, having not received the promise, but seeing them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on earth. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. That song from here, we all. That's all we're doing. We're just passing through. We just here for. The Bible tells us our life is like a vapor. We just passing through. But you know, while we're passing through here as children of God, we need to be working for Him and laboring for Him and giving Him honor and glory. I'm going to go on over here, and after you read all this, I'm coming to the latter part of this, my favorite part of this 11th chapter of Heroes of Faith. And that's verse number 32. And I'll read it through the rest of this chapter. But this is my favorite part of it all. And what shall I say the more? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, and of Samson, and Jeshamiah, of David, and also of Samuel, and of the prophets, whom through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness to obtain promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong. I want to tell you, you know, when the church and us as individuals, children of God, have got power with the Lord, when we realize that we are absolutely nothing, and everything depends upon Him, it all. When we can do that, the Lord can use us, and He'll help us, and whether we at the mouth of lions or the sword, or whatever it might be, He'll be right there with us and wrap them big old arms around us and protect us and take us through anything if we'll just let Him. But the trouble is, brothers and sisters, we don't want to let Him. We won't do it on our own. We can't do it on our own. We can't do nothing on our own. We fool ourselves when we try to do stuff on our own. His church, what we have to do is look to Him and try to do His word like He said it, just as like He said it, not waver from it. Stick to that old way. And I'm going to tell good Lord willing, I'll close with that part. Stick to that old way that we know what He set up way over yonder. I told you that article about that fellow with the pastor. He said he come out of a mega church and started his own church. Well, there was the first place he messed up. Because the first one was started over at Jerusalem by our Lord with the material from John the Baptist. That's right. Yep. And it made its way over here to us. And if it goes on, it's going to be up to us. I look at this congregation, these young people, the ones younger than me. I hope the Lord will deal with you. I hope you get on you so heavy that you'd rather serve Him and work for Him and walk before the Lord, and your children can see the Lord in you. And when you're dead and gone, they'll carry it on. Amen. That's what I hope of you. And us that are older, you know what we need to be doing? We need to be doing the same thing that the other ones can see that in us today. Verse 35 said, women received their dead, raised from life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. They had the Lord on their mind. It didn't matter what you do to me, I got the Lord on my mind. I want Him to be pleased. You can do with me what you want, what they were saying. And others had a trial of cruel mockings, discouragings, yea, moreover, bounds and imprisonment. They were stoned and were saw asunder, were tempted and were slain with the sword, and wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented. People of faith, looking to the Lord, depending on Him. You know why that we got it today? Because people was willing to whatever, to hide out, take it, whatever the people dished out on them, they took it, that it might go on. You and I today, we better be willing to take it. We better be willing to stand. And I'm going to tell you, the Lord will let you know when you need to stand. I'm going to tell you, He'll boil up in you and tell you when you need to stand for the Lord. I'm going to tell you that. He will. If you've been saved by His grace, we got something in us that lets us know the spirit of error and the spirit of truth. And He'll let you know. Then when He lets you know, I'm going to tell you something. It's right there what you've got to do. It may not be pleasant. You might think that a bunch of people are going to get mad at me. It don't matter what man thinks of you, what the Lord thinks. That's all that matters. And if He's pleased, it'll all be good. Listen to this, verse 38. Of whom this world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in dens, in caves of the earth. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. They hadn't received it yet, but they was waiting on it. Through faith. Will there be faith on earth? Will it be still here in Smith County? Will it be anywhere in Tennessee? It'll be up to the people. It'll be up to God's people whether they want it or not. That'll be the key, whether they want it or not. I'm going to go over here to Jeremiah. This is real familiar to y'all. Jeremiah chapter 6, verse number 16. Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the way and see and ask for the old paths. The old paths. You know why? There ain't but one path. There ain't but one path to the Lord. The Lord didn't organize but one church. Stick to that old way. If you know it. You might say, brother, my son or daughter, my husband or wife, whatever, they don't want to go that way. Love them and tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. But you got to stand. Because if we don't stand, the generations, the next one won't know to stand. If you compromise and go along, stand ye and ask for the old paths, where is the good way? The good way. You know why I'd say it's a good way? Because through that old way, I got saved. Amen. I got saved. I got sealed, sanctified, ready to go home one day. Through the old good way. That when I was just a little feller up there at Sycamore Valley, them old saints shouting everywhere. I ain't forgot that. It done something to me. That preaching I heard done something to me. Then when I got old enough, reached that age of accountability, it set up in me, and I found trouble, and I sought the Lord, and He saved me. You know, y'all heard me say this, there ain't nothing else out there that's better than what I got. And if you got it today, there ain't nothing no better. So what I'm going to stick with, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to stick with it. The good way and walk therein, and you shall find rest for your souls. But they said now, Jeremiah was speaking to God's people, but they said, we will not walk therein. I will set a watchman over you, hark to the sound of the trumpet. But they said, we will not hearken. We will not hearken. Therefore hear, ye nations, and know, O congregation, what is among them. Hear, O earth, behold, I will bring evil upon this people, even the fruit of their thoughts. His people, He was going to bring evil upon even their thoughts. Because why? They would not listen. And all He was telling them to do, look to Him. Look to Him. I brought you out. I'm there for you. Walk in this way. He didn't want to. Will there be faith on earth? It'll be up to us whether we want to walk in the Lord's way or not, whether we want to stand for Him, whether we want to do what He requires of us. I want to tell you, I was hard-headed, and it took me several years before I submitted and done what the Lord wanted me to do and got my wife and family back in church. But when I did, He blessed me. My life has been better since then. It'll be better if you just focus upon Him and look to Him. I mentioned my children. You know, I wonder sometimes, and I've said this many times, my son don't come. He needs to be in church. He went to college, got his master's. You know, he's educated. My daughter, she's been to college too, but she still comes to church. He says he's saved. But see, he's let the world get a hold of him. I've got my doubts with his wife as he knows anything about the Lord. If he don't never change his ways, and he has children himself, and raises them up in that way, what's going to happen for his wife and his children? See how important it is. See, there's no guarantee, even when you carry them to church, what's going to happen. There's no guarantee, but they got a lot better change. And I'm going to tell you, the Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he won't depart from it. And I'm still hoping for him. Because I tell you what, the Lord can do great things. He can break down walls, and He can bring the hardest of them down. We'll just put it in His hands. If you're here today and you've never been saved, you don't have that peace in your heart, I hope you consider, if you don't know what I was talking about today, about knowing the Lord. If you don't understand that, if His Spirit don't dwell in you, and you got that convicting spirit in your heart, knowing that you're not ready for death or for the eastern sky to spread open, Him to come back, if you're not ready for that, I hope you can think about your condition and know that Jesus is there to save you. If He's dealing with your heart, you need to seek after Him up here on this motor's bench, some back in the house, wherever it might be. He's not limited to where He can save. He can save anywhere. But you'll have to call on Him, and you'll have to come His way. Brother Byron, Sister Matilda, if you'll come, and we'll have an invitational song. If you're here and unprepared, won't you come? Would the congregation stand?
Number 408. 408. As I travel through this pilgrim land, there is a friend who walks with me. Lead me safely through the singing sand. It is the cross of Calvary. This would be
case anybody doesn't understand what a Baptist church believes, they just heard it. You just heard it right there. You don't have to go look at an encyclopedia. It came right out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Once saved, always saved, and you gotta be saved. Bless your heart for saying.
Bless you, Brother Richard. Appreciate that. Appreciate that, Brother Richard. Somebody else. Anything on your heart? Been good to be with y'all today.
Amen.
And if you're visiting with us, I hope you can come back. And it's just been good to be here. I'm thankful to see all these young folks in the Lord's house today. Sure is a blessing. Remember the short meeting that Sister Janet wants to have in her classroom when service is over? Bible study Wednesday night, 6:30. If you want to work, come a little earlier.
On the thing for Easter, on Wednesday before Easter, I sort of need a show of hands. Who all thinks that Mike could be here? Give me a show of hands. Think on Wednesday night, Brother Shealy, we'll have a meal at 5:30. At 5 o'clock, it's easy. All right? We normally have about 30. We're looking for 50 to 60. We'll just go ahead and plan on that many. Y'all come. It'll be special. It makes Easter more than just Sunday. We don't do a little something extra. What is Easter? But this is a trip through the Holy Lands. We hear Brother Shealy talk about it and preach about it, and he makes it sound so real. I want to see the pictures of it. We're also going to add extra singing in with it, because you know there's going to be places for Up From the Grave He Arose. There's going to be a place for At the Cross. We're going to put some of that into it. Y'all come and be with us. It'll be a great time, and it'll extend our Easter celebration.
Brother Jimmy, it's not this Wednesday, it's next
The next Wednesday before Easter. Yeah.
And that's at 5:30?
That's 5:30. Okay, let's say it 5:30.
5:30. Thank you, Brother Chief. Anything else on anybody's heart before we leave? I'm going to ask Brother Cason Swan to dismiss us.
Most kind and all us loving dear Heavenly Father, dear Lord, we thank you, dear Lord, for what we've already been making you feel here today, dear Lord. Thank you, dear Lord, for that, dear Lord, stay my soul home in the bed, dear Lord, for that sweet mix, dear Lord, that you spoke unto us. Thank you, dear Lord, for Mother Annie, dear Lord, for you bring the dear Lord into this way, dear Lord, for his family, Lord, for what they may do us, dear Lord. So thank you, dear Lord, for this opportunity, dear Lord, to set it unto thy spoken word once more, dear Lord. It's been preached in fire and demonstration, dear Lord. We pray, Lord, for any amongst us, Lord, that know thee not, the free pardon of sin, dear Lord, that they would take this opportunity, Lord, that they would get a hold of them, they go home, dear Lord, and they would, dear Lord, seriously consider him and burn them down, dear Lord, and lose their sleep, dear Lord, they couldn't eat, whatever it may be, that it would get, dear Lord, in the shape, dear Lord, that they can't go on without it, dear Lord. Pray, Lord, that we as thy people will be a shining light somewhere along the way, dear Lord, that they, dear Lord, be with this church, Lord, that labors on, dear Lord, give it patience, Lord, give it thy spirit, dear Lord, that they'll be about it, be with them in the revival meeting, that's shortly around the corner, dear Lord, and thy greater in the church, Lord, it will be a good work in order, Lord, when it should come this way, dear Lord. Lord, I just want to thank you for what we've been made to feel here today, and how good it's been, dear Lord, here, dear Lord, this service, dear Lord. I want to thank you once more for saving my soul. Remember all these many prayer requests, Lord, that's been asked here today. Sickness, poor health, dear Lord, wherever the case may be, dear Lord. Be with our nation, our leaders, Lord, that we would, dear Lord, look, dear Lord, unto thee, dear Lord, that we found doing that will be pleasing unto thee, dear Lord, along the way. Forgive us where we failed, our many sins, miserable ways, dear Lord, shortcuts, dear Lord, would be found, dear Lord. Give thee praise, honor, glory, both now and forevermore. Thank you once more for saving our soul. Go with us all to our spirit. Places below, dear Lord, bring us back next point in time. For it's in thy name, for thy sake we beg it all. Amen.
Amen.